All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the GBV in the Workplace panel discussion. Tonight, I'm joined by our guest panelists, Leanne Germanos, Director and Co-founder of the Embrace Project, Francesca Fonse, CEO of De Angelis, and Monica Brown, Founder and Director of Scream ZA. My name is Rumbidzai Mashele, and I sit on the regional board of the Businesswomen's Association of South Africa, also known as BOSA. BOSA is the largest and most prominent association of business and professional women in South Africa, and the voice of women in business. BOSA's history dates back to 1980. BOSA has over 8,000 members in 7 branches around the country. The organization was created as a platform for the inspiration and empowerment of women in business, as well as women in corporate South Africa, through various initiatives to assist in the creation of professional and business connections and to access new opportunities. In line with its purpose, BOSA, together with the Directors Association, is celebrating Women's Month 2021 with a series of online events designed for growth, inspiration, learning, and empowerment. Ladies, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. President Cyril Ramaphosa declared that we have a second pandemic plaguing our country, the gender-based violence and femicide pandemic. This is not a new problem in our country or the world. We have seen cases of GBV in every sphere of our society, yet GBV in the workplace, the place where we spend most of our lives, is least. GBV in the workplace can look like a customer threatening to assault a retail clerk, an employee's ex-boyfriend incessantly calling and visiting the employee during shifts, an employee being terminated and returning to a worksite with a gun, a restaurant patron fondling a server, commenting, "I left you a little something extra for that," a patient striking a nurse with a bedside lamp, or upon receiving divorce papers, a man showing up to his wife's office and killing her, as well as several of her co-workers. As you can see, GBV in the workplace can manifest in many forms. So let's dive right into it. What we will do is, I will ask the panel a series of questions and we will have a discussion, and then later we will open it up for some questions to the floor. So please just put your hand up or put a question in the chat and we will answer your question. So Leanne, a lot of us have experienced GBV at work, possibly without even fully realizing what has happened. Can you break down and define for us what GBV in the workplace actually refers to? Is there a legal definition for this?
Thanks, Rumbi. And I think that question actually opens up exactly how I wanted to address this topic. So the legally defined term or the legal form of GBV in the workplace is sexual harassment. That's the only legally defined term that we have at the moment. And sexual harassment is the unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature, which is either persistent or considered serious. There are many problems with that definition. For me personally, I'd actually like to raise something that maybe we can all discuss in a little bit more depth. But I find it problematic that the words, unwelcome, persistent, and serious exist in this definition of sexual harassment, because what it does is it opens up a lot of subjectivity for the adjudicator, who's usually a chairperson of a disciplinary hearing, to sort of, toy around with what he considers or she considers to be unwelcome on behalf of the victim or the complainant, and what they consider to be persistent or serious, which for me is a bit more concerning. I don't quite understand why sexual conduct of any kind, or even sexual attention, is something that exists or should be allowed to exist in the workplace, particularly because we're talking about professionalism, and I don't understand how any of that conduct or attention fits into the understanding of professional conduct. And I say this not to make the workplace a sterile place, you know, where people are not allowed to be human or, you know, feel attracted to people. I say that because it's only with the advent of women entering the workplace that it's become sexualized. And I say that because sexual harassment or sexual misconduct in the workplace is a barrier to equity. It stops us from feeling comfortable as women. Sometimes it results in us leaving. And it's those kind of barriers that result in the equity issue. And I know that you also said that you would like us to share some personal experiences, which I would really love to, just to explain my stance on sexual harassment as well. I personally have been subjected to sexual harassment in the workplace by a client. I was a candidate attorney at the time, and I would consider it kind of like a crime of opportunity or an opportunistic crime. I went to the client to go copy a share register, and the company secretary of the Central Energy Fund, which is a government institution, thought it was appropriate back in 2015, this is when it happened, to take photos under my skirt numerous occasions while I was there trying to photocopy this register. He also had the only access card out of the building, so he was in a position of control. And he was quite a bit older than me and obviously a client and in a senior position. But thankfully, I had quite a supportive employer who then reported the incident to his employer, and he went through a disciplinary hearing for that. Because I was the complainant, I also had to go through, I had to testify, I had to be cross-examined, and the individual in question, this company secretary, was in no way remorseful. He went in quite arrogant and chipper until the chairperson of the disciplinary hearing told him that he was going to find in my favor. And he had an option to plead guilty and get a lesser sanction, or to continue with his not guilty plea and be dismissed. So he opted for the guilty plea, was found guilty. He was docked maybe a month or two's pay. And then I found about 2 years ago, he'd been promoted to an acting head of legal position at the Central Energy Fund. So the moral of the story that I've just put out here is, you have sexual harassment, but you also have enablers. And I think a big enabler of sexual harassment in the workplace is the continued structure of patriarchy. You know, women are allowed obviously now into the workplace and there's no visible barriers, but the structure has not changed. The people in power are generally men still, in senior positions, in management positions. And I attended a women's parliament in the Western Cape provincial legislature quite recently. And the breakaway session that I was involved in spoke about the gender pay gap. And one of the most concerning things that was pointed out was the fact that there was a widening gap in top level income distribution. So in other words, less and less women are reaching top or senior management positions. And the conclusion that I drew based on my own experiences, that although the corporate space, the workspace allows women in, it's never accommodated us. It's never taken into account the disproportionate personal responsibilities that women have to shoulder. So eventually that workspace muscles women out, and top level structure doesn't change. Patriarchal structure in the workplace doesn't change. And the power differentials that usually exist between like complainants like myself and obviously the perpetrator would usually mean that it would be a woman in a junior position versus a man in a senior position, and you're unlikely to want to rock the boat. I could do it because it wasn't it wasn't somebody I worked with directly. But if I was a bit more concerned, for example, about ruining the client relationship between my firm and the client, I may have just not said anything at all. Yeah, and that's my bit on GBV in the workplace and its enablers.
I'm really sorry that experience. And I know a lot of women go through similar experiences and sometimes worse, and sometimes, you know, a decision is not made in their favor, which is really just upsetting and triggering in many forms. Now to direct the next question at Monica. Approximately 24% of workplace violence is related to personal relationships, which involves situations where an individual gains access to a workplace and commits a crime targeting an employee or a customer who is a current or former intimate partner. And this ties into what Leanne just spoke about. So Monica, what can a business owner or what can business leaders do to combat the occurrence of GBV in the workplace?
Hi, good evening, everybody. You know that business owners should start becoming people that have channels for their workers so that they know what's happening in their workers' lives. First of all, related to what you're asking, I started a project in the George area where I worked with the trauma rooms at the police stations. And we gave business owners the opportunity to channel these type of incidents of domestic violence at home and things like that to us so that we could start a support for the workers. And this is a way where you can actually stop this type of incidents, because first of all, the security will be informed that this person is going through a divorce. There's a domestic violence incident at home. These workers get support from the police directly through organizations. Whenever we had a consultation with the worker, we inform the boss that this is the situation. We don't give confidential information, but we just brief them to say, listen, for instance, Maria is going to need a day of work because we need to assist her with a protection order. Can you please also make sure that a copy of the protection order is kept with HR so that if there is an incident where this person come onto the premises, that it is available readily so that the police can arrest the perpetrator. We make photographs available of the partners to the security, access control, so that when people come, you just only walk in and want to see Monica. You have to actually say who you are, why you are there, etc., etc. So the thing is that to stop this type of thing from happening, businesses should become involved in their workers' lives, because workers are making money for these business owners. And it is their responsibility to actually know what is happening in their workers' lives. If somebody don't come to work for a week, you have to find out why. You know, if she's acting strange in a different way, you get somebody to ask her a question. If you don't want to do it, you link up with organizations in your area that can assist them and ask the necessary questions. And from my perspective, I think that business owners are too distant from their workers. And when an incident happens, everybody wants to throw their arms up in the air and say, why did this happen? But actually the signs of this happening was there all the time. So I think business should come on board and they should start something. I know the employment assistance programs are there, but a lot of people don't trust those programs because if they divulge certain information, it's now in the ears of everybody else. So it's good to find a confidential partner out there, an NGO that can work with your workers, assist them, refer them, support them. And that way, everybody stays in the loop and we protect our workers as well in that way. That is how I see it from my side. And SCREAM is very practical. SCREAM Zeta is very practical. We work with the resources available. We link up with the police stations. We link up with the magistrate's office. We link up with the protection order offices so that we know what's happening when and where, and we support these people that is going through this in a small way. It works in a small way, but I think if more people get involved and more people start doing practical things, we can stop this from happening as well.
I love that you have practical solutions for people, not just at home, but at work as well. Something as simple as telling the security guard that, you know, this woman is going through a divorce so they can keep an eye out. I think that is fantastic. A lot of people think that offices or boardrooms are the only workplaces that apply when you hear the term GBV in the workplace. Women engage in so many other kinds of work, from mining, truck driving, and farming to domestic work, teaching, and sex work. Francesca, as the founder of Women Integral Impact Network, you know the power and importance of women standing together and supporting each other. How, in your view, can women offer each other support and protection in the workplace?
Thank you, Rimbi. I just want to put some attention on facts. I am part of the UN Global Compact Gender Forum. That is the division in the UN that deals with business. I'm also the national champion for women to the Department of Justice. Creating WIN, the Women Integral Impact Network, was the national outreach from there. And I want to correct the perception of GBV in the workplace. I currently serve on the Intersectorial Commission with various departments and justice, where we are reviewing legislation with regards to women. For me personally, and it is recognized now by UNGC, unequal pay is a form of passive GBV. So let's just stop there. We're not going to debate that, it's a fact. If I have to do the same work than a man and I do not have the same benefits, what is that other than passive aggressive violence towards my person? And women must get clear on this. And, you know, I'm not preaching to women. One thing that I want women to look at is go online, join our organization. It's free. It's www.winwomen.com, winwomen.com. It's free. Download our app. That app has saved lives. The moment you go onto the security and you call whichever security division you need, your phone gets tracked. And it gets tracked in a way that you don't see. It gets tracked via Google Earth, not towers. So we can literally pinpoint you to within a square meter of where you were when you initiated that call. Get part of being the solution to your own problems. And when it comes to gender-based violence, you know, we often think that when we experience domestic violence, that is domesticated and that's where it stays. It's not. Because when you show up in the workplace, you show up as your person with all the trauma of your person, the trauma that you experience in your community, the collective trauma of a nation, the historical trauma of, for instance, South Africa and apartheid, or if you were in Europe, 2 world wars, transgenerational trauma, and also structural trauma. So we live in such a traumatized environment. And I promise you, if you knew me 6 years ago, you wouldn't have recognized me. I was a traumatized person. And it was through helping others that I learned to overcome my own traumatization. And Also in the political arena, as recently as when we were discussing the upcoming municipal elections, somebody in a very senior in the governing party, one of the gentlemen, called me Barbie. I found that totally inappropriate. So there's all kinds of trauma and forms of violence that we don't pay attention to. Sometimes the attitude alone is a form of violence. To look at me and everything that I do and achieve, I'm in business, I'm in politics, I review legislation with DOJ, I create a national outreach. We've got close on 80,000 members already. I'm with UNGC. With all this work that I'm doing, to call me Barbie, what is that? That is a passive, aggressive way of diminishing who I am and where I have grown to and my achievements. And we as women, we just don't understand these things. And it's time that we get educated on GBV. And if you want me to come and educate you, please let me know. That is what we do. I promise you, when I leave you, you'll be educated. So the fact of the matter is, we have to teach women to be less reactive, whether it's in the workspace, in our domestic environment, or in any area of our lives. The thing with trauma is it's got a physiological response. It carries along the vagus nerves that connect your amygdala to all the other organs of your body. So when you're traumatized, you get affected throughout every organ that you have in your body. And your amygdala deals with that anxiety, that flight or fright. So when you are traumatized, when you're going through a divorce that is contested and there's nasty, very often women don't understand why they get justice and they feel the magistrate, the judge, the social worker is against them. It is because they are in a traumatized perspective. Whereas if they could learn to breathe, to calm and move that amygdala, that flight or fright reaction, to the crown where you have consequential thinking or constructive thinking with your crown heart space, you will calm down and you will be part of your own process and solution. I was a mess. I had a magistrate talk to me, very angrily, and national champion of women in court, and here this magistrate screams at me. But I had to step back and say, wow, what am I doing that is affronting this person that is supposed to help me? And then I started realizing I have to calm down. That's the first thing we teach women in our organization, is how to center themselves, how to get back to that wellness so that they can start to think clear and start being part of their solution. Because when you arrive in front of a magistrate, a court official, or an attorney, you need to be centered for those people to be able to assist you in the best way possible. And we must realize, attorneys, they don't mind if court cases get postponed and postponed because they get paid. That doesn't make them necessarily bad people, but we need to know when this is enough and we can step in. And when I started being in charge of my own inner life, my core, I could see, hey, I don't like this. I could go to a court manager and say, hey, this magistrate has now had this court case that is supposed, the court mandate is 3 months. is now going on 2 years. There's something wrong here. Let us step up. Those are the kind of things. Women say we don't know it. You can know it. All that information is available on the Department of Justice's website. And if you don't know how to find it there, contact WIN. Really, it is there. And I'm talking to you as a woman who, for a long time, was not able to help herself. And it was through helping others that I had to learn how to help myself in the process. And I'm sitting here tonight talking to all you women, and I'm saying to you, if you think domestic violence or GBV are two little things that you can pocket, you can't. Because that woman showing up at work brings all the trauma of her domestic violence to work. She might not be violated at work, but she is not at her most productive. She's not at her best thinking, and she's not who she could be. That is why I think it's important that we introduce programs, and that's our next step, programs to companies to integrate, to assist employees to understand violence, to make it dissipate within the workspace, but also give that woman at work tools that she can take home and cope better. So really, if you let me talk, I'll talk the whole night. I'm very good at it.
No, Francesca, I like that you mentioned being proactive as opposed to reactive and taking control of what can be controlled in our lives. I think that's very important, especially in a world where if a woman has, just an ounce of emotion, you're being told you're overreacting, you're emotional, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's important to be able to control the narrative and control the situation as much as you can, which is not always possible.
It's not easy, Rumbi. It's not easy. I have advocates phoning me with their problems because when you're in it, you feel, you've got this cognitive dissonance. You're not in your inner space. That is why I will tell women, please be good sisters to each other. Please be that woman that another woman can turn to and say, hey, I'm hurting. Don't be the woman who's pulling her down. And understand each other. We all know that sometimes, a woman can be a little bit catty. Why is she catty? Is it a defense mechanism because she doesn't want other people to see how she's really hurting? Let us just be a little bit more compassionate towards each other. And I've said at another event earlier this month, I said, you know what, if women can really put aside all their prejudices and all the things that drive them and make them crazy for 1 month, and for 1 month, every woman on this planet supports another woman, we will change this world. Patriarchy, my backside. So really,
sorry to interrupt you, Francesca. The world is designed for men, right? And not everyone is outspoken and radical and all of those things, but we want to dismantle the patriarchy, though it's traumatizing and triggering, but we want to do something that's not exhausting to our spirits and allows us to maintain our mental health. So ladies, in your opinion, what can we do to protect our mental health and reputations and incomes and safety while still fighting this good fight? Do we spend 5 minutes a day signing petitions? What do we do?
You know what?
Petitions don't mean a thing.
If I can actually also just jump in and build on what you were saying, Francesca, about women supporting other women. I think that's a drive that I've also noticed now is really lacking, especially in the workplace. And I think we, on my organization's social media pages, we like to send out bite-sized bits of information on GBV so that people understand, from the comfort of their phone at home, the prevalence of it and its causes. And one of the quotes that we actually put up this week was from the late Winnie Mandela. And she said basically that women don't stand with each other because we see each other as competitors. We are competing either for husbands, for our sons, for our fathers, all this different kind of attention. And that's probably also a nice construct for the patriarchy to keep us where we are. We make up 50% of the world, yet we're still so oppressed in this day and age. And it's kind of bizarre to think that that's still possible, especially because we make up half of the population. How is it that we have remained in this position that we're in? And also something else that Francesca touched on, which is a different form of violence in the workplace, being the gender pay gap. If I can just give some statistics on that as well and explain the knock-on effect of being paid so much less as women. In South Africa, there's a gender pay gap of 30%. So women in South Africa are paid 30% less than men. And this can include women doing the same job, even though in our laws, the Employment Equity Act requires that we get equal pay for equal work. But what studies have also found is that women-headed households, for example, are 41% poorer than male-headed households, yet women-headed households support a lot more dependents. So what that means in the long run for women is that we don't have enough money to actually sustain ourselves in our old age when we retire. Those funds run out a lot quicker. So what that means is that we're more likely to stay with an employer that's abusive and a partner that's abusive because we're not economically independent. And the system is designed that way. And I mean, when I was talking a bit earlier on about the top level income distribution gap widening, the statistics on that is that there are about, I think, 5.8% of the CEOs on JSE listed companies are women, 5%. And 20.7%, I think, of directors on these JSE listed companies are women. And I mean, I would venture a guess and say that it's as high as 20% because there are requirements now that you have to have a female face on your board. But that is in no way enough to make up or bridge that gap, especially in a system that sure doesn't put up barriers for us anymore, but it doesn't really welcome us either. It doesn't accommodate us. And those are forms of violence in the workplace that then also perpetuate social issues in our country, like GBV at home, and the economic dependency that it then fosters between women and their or victims and their perpetrators. Yeah, that's
there's so much that we can look at, Rumbi. In 2019, we hosted the WIN Gender Economic Dialogues in Sandton, and it was screened full day on national television. I think it was TV2. And I actually challenged the output of Stats SA and PwC, who put the impact of GBV at around 30 billion annually. And I proved on screen that it was more than 70 billion. Can you imagine 70 billion being brought back into the economy where it's supposed to be, instead of going through court processes, patching women together in clinics and hospitals, and police dealing with all that violence? It's totally unacceptable. If we look at the majority of job losses through COVID, women, 170 women's jobs were affected by these riots a few weeks ago. It's always women. And to women, I'm saying to you, if you knew me 20 years ago, I was as shy as anything. So if you need somebody to fight, find somebody who can fight. Don't go and try and fight it on your own. If it's not, someone in your community is a fighter. And if you don't find it in your community, contact us. We are fighters.
And a lot of us are now working from home, and this has resulted in an increased exposure to domestic violence because lockdown measures have basically trapped women inside with their abusers. The government's GBV and Femicide Command Call Center recorded more than 120,000 victims in the first 3 weeks of the first lockdown. So I want to know, how does one deal with GBV in the workplace when your workplace is also your home? And what can you do to protect yourself and your ability to provide for yourself and your family? Also keeping in mind that, as you said, women are not making enough to look after themselves and their families, but we make up the majority of the heads of the household, so to say.
If you want to know what I would do, when we are contacted with women and, if they ask me to come and speak to their abusers, I will. You must remember one thing about an abuser. That abuser, it's generational. That abuser is a child with childhood wounds of abuse who's now grown up and is now abusing the person that he or she regards as weaker as them, because women can also affect gender-based violence, by the way. Less than men, but let's not, step over the men that experience this as well. So really, you can, social workers, police, there's processes. I'm not saying for every family fight run to the police. I'm saying if that man or that woman, number one, physically hurts you, if there is mental terrors, emotional terrors, psychological terrors, economical abuse, verbal abuse, if you feel that you are losing the core of your being because of all these things that you're experiencing, I would advise you go either seek a social worker or go to the police. And from the police, go to the domestic violence court. The problem is, and this we see, a lot of women open cases, but they never go through. And those are the women that end up getting killed. That's the femicide victims. When they get smooth talked, not every femicide victim, please, I'm not suggesting that. I said a lot of the women that go, they lay the cases, they withdraw, they get smooth talk, they end up unfortunately dead.
Which is a tragedy. As the president said, we have an entire second pandemic happening. Monica,
I don't agree with the president either. That's the first pandemic. COVID is the secondary pandemic.
True. Monica, I know you work a lot with families and your boots on the ground with these things. What in your experience has helped, and what can women do, seeing as we are working from home and we're waiting for everyone to get vaccinated, but that we don't know what the future holds for us. We don't know whether we'll go back to work or not in normal places of work, so to say.
Yeah, you know what? Just to give you a background of who I work with. I don't work with the professional ladies. I work with the people on the ground. I work with your domestic workers who will have to go work because unfortunately they can't stay home with their abusers. I work with the ordinary woman that every day, some of when they get killed, don't even make the newspaper. That is the people I work with. So I wouldn't be able to give you an answer on that. But what I do know is that when you're there 24 hours with your abuser, it will affect you very badly. It will mentally destroy you. And in the end, you wouldn't even know what to do. So the people I work with in Scream are the ordinary women who the justice system in some cases let down. People like what Francisca was saying, don't go back, don't follow through. Those are the people I work with. because the situation is like this. If he is the breadwinner and you need to now tonight have to open a case, tomorrow you have to think who's going to provide you with something for your children to eat. And number two, when the same ordinary woman goes to the police station, she gets subjected to the most horrendous treatment. So she ends up turning around. She ends up giving up. She ends up thinking there's nobody out there that cares. So as professional women tonight, I am appealing to you people that when you can assist, look at that woman as the person that in this country is the majority, the person that is out there cleaning your house, looking after your children, cleaning the streets. That woman is also suffering on a daily basis, and she doesn't have a choice. So we need to look at solutions to help women, irrespective of where they come from, irrespective of their status, irrespective of their age. You know, it's nice to have the GBV hotline, but how many women think of making that call, knowing what to say? We need to have structures in place in our communities. All these departments need to come together, and they need to look at strategic ways, practical ways for women to be able to walk into a place. They need to disseminate information on these acts. What is a protection order? How do you use it? How can it be effective? If I have a problem with A, I go to A, B, C, D. But when they get to court, they get looked out in a funny way. They go to the police station, they don't get assistance because they don't know what to say. So in the end, I firmly believe that an organization, a business organization for women, the time has come for all of us to do something for the ordinary woman in this country, because they are the ones that's getting killed and never make the newspapers. They are not famous. They are not your Oscar Pistorius people that get killed. So they go to work. In my case, I know about a lot of women, domestic workers, that goes to work every day and get raped every day. And in the end, when she can't take it anymore, she kills herself. Isn't that a person in a workplace? That's also a workplace, being a domestic worker. A teacher going to school, being harassed, having to take violence from the children, violence from the family at home, violence when she stands up against her male teachers or something. Those are also ordinary women. So we need to rethink when we talk about gender-based violence and we are sitting on all these organizations, but what are we practically doing on the ground? What changes are we bringing about? We can have all the laws and the policies in the world, but women are still being killed on a daily basis. So what are we doing as professional women? So to come back to your question, as I said, I cannot really give you an answer on that because the women I work with during COVID, they have to go work. So I cannot give you an answer on that.
But I am really glad that you mentioned, the ordinary women, because these are women who share spaces with us. They're in our homes, they're in our workplaces, they're everywhere. And as you said, they're not getting the attention they deserve when it comes to some of these matters. For the news, it might not be newsworthy, but these are still women, these are still lives, and these are still GBV issues that need to be addressed. And I think it is important for us as women to create safe spaces for other women, be it in our homes, our workplaces, transportation, wherever it is, and to support each other in whatever ways that we can. So it leads me to my next question, which is, how does one report, any act or sign of gender-based violence in the workplace, and whose responsibility is it to handle the matter? Because I know a lot of women don't actually know what to do. Who do you call? What is the hotline number? Do you speak to HR? What do you do?
Yes, you do. You speak to HR. I just want to say, you know, WIN was the structure that is created as a national outreach. It is not an organization that is functioning in autonomy at all. There's a lot of other CBOs, NGOs that is joined WIN as members. They can go onto our platform, they can advertise their events, they can, people can even advertise for jobs or, you know, services. And we also record every Saturday, myself and other women, we record sessions that is on the Facebook platform that discuss these things. When you need to go for maintenance, how do you go about it? What is you know, relevant when it comes to a maintenance claim? When you get married, the way you get married will affect how you will get divorced. What are the impacts? All those things are discussed. We really try and get the information to women. And also, when COVID dies down, I will start with Department of Justice. We will start traveling again. We do a lot of what we call gender dialogues. I must say, currently, the 80,000 members of WIN, the majority are in rural areas. We've got 4,000 professionals, social workers, attorneys that are on advisory platforms in WhatsApp, where women join and, you know, when they ask questions, their questions get answered. The fact of the matter is, that is what it's for. Women, Integral Impact Network. It's a network platform for women. It's their businesses, their NGOs, their CBOs, everything. If they want to join it, contact with each other and help each other. That is what it's for. And when you look at the workplace, you have to report such an incident to HR. And if your company and your HR does not perform, you can report the matter to the Commission on Gender Equality, the CGE. So you can also go to Department of Labor, because they also have a influence in the workspace. So they are HR, CGE, Commission on Gender Equality, Department of Labor. There's at least 3 options now. I want to take the UNGC platform, Gender Forum, and get more involved with business, because it is the area in the UN that deals with business. So I hope that it would empower us, that we can work through justice, through the UNGC and the Commission on Gender Equality, and have more of a congruent effort to address inequalities in the workplace and gender-based violence in the workplace.
There is another avenue as well. Obviously, there's the criminal element. You can always also report it to the police if it's assault in some way. So in the case, for example, of what happened to me, I had the option of pursuing 2 routes, which was the internal disciplinary route, which is that's specific to a company, and also the criminal route. I was even advised not to bother with that, because there was just going to be very little evidence that the police could collect and gather, and, you know, I was advised not to put myself through that. But employers actually all have a positive legal duty to protect their workers from unfair discrimination, which includes harassment in the workplace. But every organization or company has their own policies that you follow for sexual harassment, or forms of GBV in the workplace, or complaints mechanisms. So you actually just have to ask for your particular company or organization's policies.
Absolutely, Leanne, but I also need women to remember that company policy is that company policy. that company must still comply with the national legislation. And there is legislation protecting you. So if you are not sure how to go about things, find out. It is, you know, we live our lives. We are exposed to all these things that impact us just as we impact the lives of our children, the people. We need to start looking for the answers if they're not obvious. It is part of our responsibility. And yes, I know, especially in the townships, you know, there's a lot of disparity. Just to think, you know, towards the end of last year, we had 2 Saturday trainings. The one was in Diep Kloof, Soweto, and the other one was in another part of Soweto. And from that, with the MEC for Safety and Security, and with the complaints against the police and reporting it to justice, and in this intersectorial commission, SAPS is represented, the SAPS board. So a whole new community outreach happened with SAPS, where they are now accountable. So you know what? We, civil society, need to start standing on our rights. We, the taxpayers, pay the salaries of civil servants, from the police to the politicians. We need to start being a little bit more assertive. And I know it's not always easy for women. We really have to pull together. The moment we pull together, things happen, things change. I have not seen an abusive man when I'm asked, or somebody else in our network is asked to attend to him. And that's why I said, you know, these are generational, transgenerational perpetuation of violence, because that person refers, they go back to what they experience and what they know. When a man abuses a woman, and somebody who is like me now, who is now stepped up and owned up, shows up on his door and say to him, "Hey fellow, what you doing?" You'll be surprised how it changes. I'm not saying we're super women, but that is where societies needs to change. The things that go wrong happen within the societies. So if those strong components within a society can team together, there are men who are good. Put the good men with the good women together and have a little bit of guts and confront these people. I promise you, you will change it. We are far too passive in our own happiness and our own well-being. And then we're surprised when we wake up one morning and think, oh my God, where am I? Who am I? And what happened? It is avoidance and unaccountability. Now, the moment you avoid taking responsibility or accounting or being aware of what is happening in your own life, you are giving other people power over your life. And we women need to love each other enough to tell each other that, to educate each other.
You know, Francesca, I like how you said, you know, we should look to the people in our communities, in our societies for assistance, be it family, friends, whoever. I've had an experience where, you know, the police told me point blank, we don't have enough evidence, we can't help you. You know, and I had to look to family and friends. So Leanne, I think you were right in not going in that direction. We're going to open it up to the audience now, and I see we already have a question. This is from Zotumo Ngiti. She says, how can workplaces be made safer and more conducive for work, particularly for women, as our focus is for tonight? One, there are cases where women are wronged in many ways, but they're too scared to report the perpetrators. Two, in some cases, women who do take the first step of reporting such incidents either don't get taken seriously or have their cases handled in the most unjust manner. Three, sometimes the victim ends up being sidelined and further victimized by the original perpetrator and their gangs, inverted commas, and buddies. Four, where formal processes are followed, they are sometimes not favorable to the victims and may even lead to victims losing their voice and or even their jobs in some cases.
Ruby, if I may, I've written something on this before, on this very issue where complainants are too scared to report their abusers in the workplace, particularly if they work with them and particularly if they're more senior. The problem with the system we currently have in our labor law is that you would go through a disciplinary proceeding, which is it's designed to be very accusatorial. It kind of looks like a court system, and it affords no protection for the victim. It doesn't afford them any protection in terms of their identity. Yeah, it doesn't allow the public to know that a complaint has been laid by this victim, but doesn't protect the victim from the perpetrator. Sorry?
Go ahead.
It doesn't protect the victim's identity from the perpetrator. And a suggestion that I'd previously put forward is maybe looking at reforming that and having, instead of a disciplinary hearing, a sort of a panel of inquiry. So you'll have people who are on this panel who are there to sort of fact find. So what happens is the victim can put forward their complaint to this panel, and the panel does with it what it will. It doesn't put forward the victim's version to the perpetrator. But what it does is then it finds different means of finding out facts and figuring out the truth, and then coming to a decision on that. The one disadvantage of having a panel of inquiry instead of a disciplinary hearing is that panels of inquiry can only give non-binding recommendations. So there's no verdicts, nothing to say that this person or this perpetrator is guilty and this is the sanction, it's dismissal. But I think that maybe if we started to look a little bit outside of the box and didn't just keep to like the structures that are there, that maybe we could find a way to protect victims a bit more, to make them a bit more willing to come forward, and also to find ways around figuring out the truth and what's going on in the workplace and who is abusing who. And this might not be a foolproof solution, but it is an innovative way of maybe handling abuse in the workplace. So a victim doesn't have to go through jabs from the perpetrator's buddies, or even if the recommendation is not favorable to the victim, the identity isn't really revealed to the perpetrator, and the perpetrator might not necessarily have to even know what it's about.
I see a bit of a problem from a legal perspective, that the perpetrator won't know who the person is that reported them. I don't see that is possible. The fact of the matter is, when we look at women, yes, the guy is not going to harass a woman that won't be harassed. So in other words, a woman who is in her own power, they don't easily harass them. They will go for the women that they see as weaker. And unfortunately, this so, we can go and delve so deep, but it starts at home. And I would like to see that we create maybe a series of either a television series that actually has some value and teach people principles through it, or documentaries that discuss these things, that people give have access to information. But the fact of the matter is, education is supposed to start at home. And a lot of the education does not happen at home. So when the government try and take it to school, then everybody gets upset. I can tell you things about women that you haven't heard of. In COVID last year, for instance, I dealt with a theatre sister who's a single mom, and her son impregnated both his younger sisters. Now, you have these two kids, the one is 13, 14, and the other one 16, who's now having abortions because it's their brother. But when government try and take the responsibility of sexual education at school, everybody screams. But why is it necessary? If you look at it and what everybody got so upset about, because there's incest at home. There's challenges for kids at home. And if they don't know that it's wrong somewhere, how will they ever report it? I know an incredible person who was abused by her own cousin for years. And then on Sundays, the two single moms take the two kids with them to church. And it was only when she was in the beginning throes of high school and sexual education started that she realized this was wrong and could start reporting something about it. Sometimes our society is losing values simply because of a lack of information. There's so much extra pressure on women, especially single parent households. Some women don't always get to talk those talks with their children. I was saying to a group the other day, sometimes I think my children thought I was a very strange mom until one friend, and always said, Mom, you talk about things too much. Until one friend said, no, this is interesting. My mom talks to me about nothing. I love to hear a mom that is open and tell me so that I have information. So there's always this finding the right balance, giving a child enough information so that they can protect themselves, giving in any society enough information. And I would love to see, and it's globally, it's not only in South Africa, but unfortunately South Africa is number one in the world. It's really a position that we need to work on with all this violence and things that women are experiencing. I would love to see that we return to values in our society. Values, that's what it is.
So tell me then, on that note, how do we better prepare young women and men for the working world, knowing that South Africa is ranked the most dangerous country in the world for women? And just because you're at work, it doesn't make it any safer for you. And I know, Monica, you're working on a documentary.
Honest education, Rumbi. If you don't tell them honestly, you don't have to be brutal and gruesome about it, but tell them the facts in the most decent manner possible. Educate them. If you don't know what to watch out for, you're going to be a victim.
No, definitely. Monica, you were about to say something.
Now, I was just going to share something with you all. Working at a school, I am working on a program on school-related gender-based violence. And we are working with these girls. We call it the boys. I've got a gentleman's project where we basically, I get mentors for them. And, just to help them to create their own value system, to show them, what is it like, how should you treat a girl and whatever. And with the girls, I've got the Queen Bee project. So the Queen Bee project is where we show them that you as a girl, you are worthy. You should stand up for yourself. We educate them about certain things, because now we have this big problem where young girls wants to live the high life and they get the blessers and all these things, and that is the start of the downfall, because now they don't have a value system, etc. So in the schooling environment, we are also trying very hard to teach them the values and what is right and what is wrong. And some parents don't like it. I can be honest with you in saying that, because when a father is doing something that the boy child don't like towards the mum, then he would say, Dad, but you're actually doing the wrong thing now. That is not how you should treat a lady. And then I would get saying, hey, what are you teaching my child? Are you trying to make trouble for me at home, you know? So it all starts also at the schools. And I think that what was said earlier is so important, that we should teach them what is right and wrong, the value system, the morals, because they go back home. And when they see something wrong, the kids of today, they talk about everything. They will say to you, no, Mum, that's not the way to talk to Dad. Or Dad, that's not the way to talk to Mum, you know? And it becomes an important issue that our kids should know what is right and wrong. So I support all that as a person in the education sector as well. I would love to see more of this education and more of these programs being implemented at schools at all levels.
We have an interesting question from Tlamelo. She says that many women experience victimization and harassment using public transportation, as well as particularly taxis on their way to work. So do you have any thoughts or ideas around dealing with this?
It's very simple. Every taxi has got a number, and every taxi belongs to an association. So if this happens, they should go to the police and they must report that taxi, and they must also report that taxi to the association. That is a start. You know, these men believe that they will always get away with it because nobody ever reports it. So every taxi has got a number that is unique to that taxi. And every taxi in this country belongs to a taxi association. And that is the way you deal with it, through the association, but as well as the police.
I think an overarching issue which seems to be repeated throughout this discussion is a lack of accountability, I think, by all these institutions that we're reporting all of these things to, the police, et cetera, the Department of Labor, Commission for Gender Equality. Those institutions, the Chapter 9s generally are a bit more responsive, but our government departments, not so much. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and also to Francesca's point, that we need to continuously push and put pressure, but the kind of pressure that we should be placing is on accountability, which I think is a bigger issue in South Africa, particularly given the Zondo Commission and the state capture and corruption, and the fact that, you know, everybody seems to operate with impunity. So it is a larger issue within our society. But one example, or one thing that I can say that my organization, the Embrace Project, is doing, we're actually running a petition. I know Francesca poo-pooed that a bit earlier, but we have 21,000 signatures at the moment. And the purpose behind that particular petition was to actually, it's addressed to the president. It's to say to him, hey, where's the political will? You have come with these fantastic promises. You've said our names. You've come out, called this the second pandemic. We have these emergency response action plans from the Office of the Presidency. We have a GBVF response fund, which, by the way, hasn't dispersed a single cent yet. And we have all these wonderful new legislative reforms, and our organization knows this because we were involved in the public participation process last year, where we commented on 4 of these bills, and nothing has been signed into law yet. And quite honestly, I don't think it will matter when they are. because the statistics we're seeing, 15% of the domestic violence complaints laid in 2019, 2020 were granted as orders. People withdraw because after 3 years, their matter still hasn't been set down. So we have all these sexual offences courts, but none of our machinery are really working. And so what we have tried to do is to continuously hold the government to account. And in the limited contact and communication we've had with the Office of the Presidency, we found that the office, one, tried to actually pass off a letter that we'd written to the president. They tried to push it to the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, a department I didn't even know existed until about 2 years ago, and I'm still not entirely sure what their mandate is. And then when we pushed back and said, actually, no, this is the appropriate, your office is the appropriate government stakeholder, we got no response. But on Monday, we're going to hand over physically this petition. And eventually we got hold of the presidency, we finally got them to, undertake that they will allow us in to hand over this petition. And we got their undertaking that they would consider our motivation as to why their department, or rather them as the Office of the Presidency, are the correct government stakeholders. But it's this constant pressure that you have to place on government to say, like, yes, you have all of these structures in place and now supposedly the funding, but our numbers are still soaring. So why aren't you actually dealing with this properly? And I think it was something that Monica raised a bit earlier, that women in leadership positions in government don't even know what GBV is, which is concerning because those are supposed to be the people in government championing the cause. And they're not even really au fait with the issues, which is highly concerning. And also something that Francesca raised a bit earlier, that we should stop being reactionary. We should be proactive. What the government has in place at the moment is ways to punish perpetrators, people who've already committed sexual violence or femicide. That's too late. We're not there. There's not a single policy in place that I know of, which is trying to bring in preventative measures where you have specialized curricula at school that is unteaching what's happening to children at home to break that cycle of violence. There's no psychosocial services being disseminated or pushed into communities that are, violence prone. We can't just deal with GBV in a vacuum and react to the violence that's happening. Also in a criminal justice system that's not really working. So why aren't we trying to tackle the issue at the root cause? The fact that people grow up in violent households and turn into violent adults, which Francesca has said a number of times during this conversation. But there are no policies in government, there's no movement on government's part to tackle the preventative issues.
Leanne, you are here to get me into trouble today. Let me quickly explain to you. People don't understand how things work. Please look when you deal with a department, if it is an executive department. And more than that, I'm not going to say. Because only in an executive department can things actually be affected that can change things. Going back to the presidential summit on gender-based violence, you must remember you have an organization like the Intersectoral Commission that sits and reviews these laws. It's SAPS, Correctional Services, Health, Stats South Africa Police. It's 25 people, and each one is from a different environment and crucial to that conversation. So for continuancy, there is a program to get these people together on a regular basis. Now there's a cry out. Yes, was the cry out justified? It was. But now all of a sudden, these people's whole program is dislodged and progress is halted to have a summit. Now, after the summit, it takes you another 6 months to get these people's diaries back online. The reviewed regulations in the legislation of domestic violence could have been promulgated a year early if it wasn't for this disruption here in the middle. So sometimes people think they take the right action, but they don't know the impacts. So if you want to ask me, you know, probably I'm kind of, I don't mind, I can handle trouble, I don't care. But please listen when I'm saying, start within your community. Many urban areas has got security companies. In the ANC, you know, in townships, there used to be street committees. Go back to basics, people, and get strong women and decent men together and show values and talk values and behave values, so that those who are non-conformist can realize they cannot do what they want anymore. We can legislate you into perfection, but we cannot legislate a violent person out of violence. Yes, you can legislate in better consequences, but if he's killed that woman, he's killed that woman. That must stop in the community where that person is raised and grow up. People sent me videos. I saw a video recently of a mom and how she treated a tiny little boy, and I was like, oh my God, next kilo in 20 years. What do we do as women? How do we support each other? Whether it's in a village, in rural South Africa, in a township, or in suburbia. What is it that woman felt so unsupported that she had to vent her own frustration and her own violence that she couldn't contain anymore on such a small little child? It's not only men. What happens? That is where it starts. That's what I'm saying to you. Violence is transgenerational. The chances that a child who's experienced violence in their home is going to become a perpetrator is almost a given fact. If communities start supporting each other more, if that struggling mom who's left by the guy is supported by the community, and the sisters and the brothers and the mothers of the guy who left her is confronted and say, hey, what are you doing? You've got children with this woman. Are you supporting them? That sense of accountability in our families and in our communities. Nobody confronts the guy. That guy has had a mother, a father, and maybe if he didn't grow up with knowing the father, maybe have had sister or uncle. Somebody had influence over that person. We need to start standing for each other. And we can legislate and legislate, I promise you, but that is a tool. It's not the answer. The answer needs to start in our communities, in our accountability. And to anybody listening to me tonight, you are your sister's keeper. You are your brother's keeper. We have been indicated to be each other's keepers since Cain and Abel. And if you don't follow that history, go and find it. You'll find it somewhere else. We are responsible for each other. I don't care who you are. I don't care your racial orientation. I don't care anything about you, but that you're from the human race. If you're from the human race, You are responsible for each other, period.
No, definitely. And speaking of being accountable and responsible for each other, I saw that the Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Leanne, Maite Nkwana Mashabane, suggested hosting engagements with men and boys to encourage positive masculinity as one of the ways in which we can play our part in combating GBV. In my personal experience, men tend to shy away from these conversations. Some don't want to say the wrong thing, while others are in complete denial of the reality we live in. And of course, there's a spectrum in between. So what can we do to increase male interest and participation in this fight against GBV? Because we're not in this alone. It's not a women problem. You know, it's an everyone problem.
Who are you asking it to? You're asking me because
Well, Leanne just unmuted her mic, so go ahead, Leanne.
But before I answer though, Monica, do you want to jump in? You muted.
Monica, you're muted.
Hi, sorry for that. I'm saying that men are very responsive and they're very involved in because the two directors of Scream ZA are men. I'm the only lady really involved. So they do a lot of work with boys and with men. They go to churches, open the dialogue, talk to them, have some talks with them, take them out on camping and whatever. So men really wants to step up. But the thing is, they are also scared of what other men will say to them. They don't want to confront the friend that is the perpetrator. They don't want to break up the friendship. They don't want to, at work, they see another guy doing a wrong thing, but they don't want to get involved. So that is another thing that we need to do, that we need to try and get our men to step up. If somebody is doing something wrong, I'm going to say to him, listen, my friend, we can be friends, but you really need to come now. You shouldn't do this, you know. And men are not there yet. They are talking, but they're not there yet to confront. And the boys that I work with on a daily basis, they are starting to confront the fathers at home. They are starting to confront the people in their community. They are starting to do good things. So I would say that the eagerness are there, the willingness is there, but, you know, stepping up to the plate to actually confront, I don't see that yet, especially in the men, you know, the grown men. They don't want to confront their friends and the family members and their brothers. They don't want to do that yet. No.
But because honestly, like the GBV isn't a woman's problem. We're the victims usually. So it's clearly a male problem. And if we really want to eradicate GBV, you have to have the male buy-in.
I don't agree with you.
Okay, but can I finish and then you can say why you don't agree. And the reason I say that, and actually the reason behind the Embrace Project and us calling it the Embrace Project was because we purposefully didn't want to exclude men. We wanted to have their buy-in, because to eradicate GBV, you have to have the male buy-in. They are the majority of the perpetrators. They are over, I think, 90%, the perpetrators. And our effort to try and get the male population included in the fight around GBV has now also included a campaign that we've called the Real Man Campaign. And the idea behind that was to get men to give one sentence on what a real man is and one sentence on what a real man is not, to change the toxic narrative around, you know, the macho real man. And that's how we're hoping to get the male buy-in and also get a positive masculinity narrative going. Even our motto for the Embrace Project was every human's power, and we purposefully didn't just say woman, because we know we're inherently powerful. And to have to reinforce or tell a woman that is kind of almost patronizing and sort of does the opposite. And also by including the word human, we were purposefully trying to include men as well. And that it's within all of our power to change. And I'm quite saddened also to know that most of our following and most of any anti-GBV organization following is actually female, because it's generally an issue that affects us. And although I'm now having more of these conversations with my male friends, if I hadn't had those conversations with them, it's not a topic that would have popped up in their friendship circles because it doesn't affect them. And that's how it was explained to me by one male. And it is hard, like Monica was saying, it is hard for men to, in their circles, stop other men from talking about women in a particular way, calling them a thing, sort of the, using terms that sort of objectify them, and to get them to move away from the male jargon, from, that macho jargon. That's going to take quite some work. And that's why we were also hoping to use this Real Man campaign to change that narrative.
Okay, I'll tell you why I said I didn't agree. Because it's a societal problem. A lot of the issues that we experience in society today is because men had so much power. Patriarchy, it was so much power. It is time that women realize you can't give the GBV responsibility, because the moment you take responsibility, you have power. Now back to the men, and we are now these little damsels. Take back your power. You have it. You have to have your power. And the late King Zwelatini worked very close with us. And he stood out on the podium and he confronted customary practices that were practiced by chieftains who was not at the core of Zulu customs. So there are men. It's just, we all need to start with the realization that everybody has got the power. Men, women, and children. Obviously not small little children, but at least those that are going to school that have access to different information. It is all our problem. And that abusive man had a mother. Many of them, most of them in jail, about 82% of the abusers in jail grew up without the father figure. Now, how skew is that? He had a mother, he had aunties, and he probably had sisters and brothers. And he's grown up to be, that is why I'm saying, we as women are not completely innocent. A mother gets divorced, she's got a son, she's angry at the father, and she is emotionally abusive to that boy because he's a male, because she is angry at the father. But also, even in my own case, we have to start taking accountability for the things we allow that cause us to abandon ourselves. And that is where it comes to that psychology of avoidance. You're married, something goes wrong, it is against your value system, but you let it slip for the sake of peace. You allow it to escalate. We allow things. We need to start facing that. We need to start owning up as women. So I'm not saying every woman that's divorced is doing something to her son that turns him into an abuser. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there is so many scenarios. And the fact of the matter is, everybody is responsible. We cannot give one gender the power to now come and wield this power over GBV as well. We've got our own power. We need to own up to it. We need to start being rational. We are an incredible reactive society. That's why we have GBV. Because humans don't think consequentially. They are thinking with this animal brain. There's no cognitive thought combined with heart-centeredness. that gives you responsible reaction or consequentiality. We must stop being, we need to get back to our core. How do you get back to your core? Go for a walk in the garden or in the veld or wherever. Be kind to an animal, be kind to a child. Kindness is the #1 change maker into what is inside you. Teach children who are hurt to be kind, either to another child or an animal. Something that they can be kind to. Let them rediscover that little kindness to their core. You will see the human being change. Kindness, gratitude. Those are the values society has started ill-treating or disregarding, and that is why we find ourselves where we are today. You cannot be kind and cruel at the same time. It's impossible. So we need to start, as mothers, teach our children to be kind to a bird, whatever. It's little. It's those little things in life that can change it around. And it starts with all of us. I see Clamelo wrote here about the lady selling the dog beds. I saw that, and the moment they sent me that video, I reported it to the directorate, and it was dealt with very quickly. So yes, it is good when people can make little videos of injustices and forward it. If it lands with the right person and you can deal with the right people, things can be done about it, for sure.
No, definitely the power of technology has really created a new form of justice and trial, I would say, especially with Twitter. Is there any other question from our audience? You can put your hand up for pop a question in the chat. Otherwise, we can bring this discussion to a close.
I think the audience had a awakening session tonight, really.
No, definitely. I've definitely learned so much from you ladies, and it's good to know that, you know, so many people are doing so many different things in different spheres and different walks of life, that, you know, it's not a hopeless situation. You sit and watch the news every morning, and it's honestly very disheartening. It's painful, it's heartbreaking. So it's good to know that, you know, aside from those of us marching in the streets with placards, there are people doing work in other areas, you know, in the background, on the ground. So it's really heartwarming.
It's absolutely fantastic, frankly. You know, there's no organization that can go about it alone. There's no government who can regulate this kind of situation alone. It will take every community-based organization, any non-profit, any person with a sane mind and some, you know, some decency. It will take us all. We all need to start showing up in our power, and our power is kindness and decency.
No, definitely. Okay, so there aren't any more questions. Any closing words from either of you ladies, Monica, Leanne?
I just want to clarify one point, and so it's not really a closing remark. Just Francesca said earlier that she thought there would be a legal issue with submitting a complaint to a panel of inquiry without informing the perpetrator of the identity. I was speaking from a legal background when I said that's not a problem, because it is a fact-finding mission and panel, and they do issue non-binding recommendations, so that the anonymity of complainants is not a problem in that kind of a setup, which is why I would still suggest it as a possible alternative in the workplace to disciplinary hearings. And that's it. Thank you.
Monica, last word.
I just want to say that communities need to take take back their street corners. They need to take responsibility. They need to start getting involved. Churches need to get involved. Every form of everything that's part of that community, they need to step up to the plate. Because at the end of the day, when somebody dies or somebody gets abused, it affects the community. So communities should get involved. Families should stop turning a blind eye because this guy has got enough money to pay for everybody. Money you can always make, but your life, you can never get it back when you die. So we all have a responsibility, like both Leanne and Francesca said, we all have a responsibility and we all need to start caring because you can't care and hate at the same time. And that is all I can say. With the little that I do, I change lives. So I
Fantastic.
believe all of us can do that.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what, Monica, you don't do a little. That's the first thing that I want to ask you. Please, please don't ever assume you're doing little because then you're giving your power away. You know you're doing a lot. Please own it. Own it. That every one little boy that goes home that asks a question, you've empowered. It's fantastic. I can only applaud you. And I just want to say also, you know, for people, please don't hand your children over to pastors. We also now include religious abuse in domestic violence because of this phenomena. There are many good pastors and priests out there, but please don't be gullible. It's your child. Don't be gullible.
No, definitely. And as a new mom, I take that to heart. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think we can close. On behalf of BOSA and Directors Association, I'd like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to you ladies. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom, your experience, your stories with us today. Thank you for making it a safe space for us to discuss these matters and to find ways to deal with it in our everyday lives. It's a very important topic and a very topical one. And thank you to all of our partners, to all of our viewers for joining us this evening. And that concludes our Women's Month events for 2021. Please be sure to keep an eye out for future BOSA events and activities. And if you'd like to know more about at BOSAGP at womensmonth21.co.za, that's BWASAGP at womensmonth21.co.za. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.